We're going to talk about looking at transmission drums. A lot of times they're cracked and broke, and you either find good serviceable used drums or you replace them, and there's several different sources for replacement drums now, and I find that it's a fairly simple task to do. So we're going to look at drums that, where the brakes are typically, talk a little bit about that, talk about if we do have a cracked drum, do we have a good gear, make sure that we'd like to have decent gears. You'd like to run your existing gear in your transmission if you're replacing a drum, because a lot of people think that mixing, matching drums that have wore together for 60, 80, 90, 100 years, if you throw a new drum gear in something, you have the potential or the tendency maybe to have a little noisier transmission because the gears have worn themselves somewhat together. So if you can use your existing gear, and we're going to talk about what is a good gear and what's not a good gear and why you'd want to find another one, go through the process, identify where these cracks are, go through that process, and then talk about what we need to do to change out a drum. And we'll go and take the rivets out of the drum, replace the rivets in the drums, and then finish off machining the surfaces so we don't have any interference with the rivets that we drive in. So let's start with drums. Cracked drums, typical cracks. This is a reverse drum. As you can see, I've taken the gear out of it, I've replaced it, but typically you'll find cracks up here in the webs. A lot of times you'll find a crack coming out of where it was riveted together, and I don't know, some of these cracks might have been from the original process when they riveted it, drove it a little hard or split it, but it's not uncommon to see some cracks here. People are of the opinion that perhaps a crack there is not really an issue, but sometimes these cracks will migrate on up. So your choice on that, but definitely if we've got cracks in this area, that's not a good choice here. This is a low speed. You can see it's cracked across through, and then it even throwed a chunk away completely out of it. This is a drum that I've taken out of one of my transmissions. At some point in time, somebody tried to balance it. I don't know who did that, but they've drilled out quite a bit of material in a low-speed drum. Anytime that you find them cracked, they're always cracked through the webs, so I think this drum wouldn't be happy very long. At least I wouldn't put it in my car. So it does have a good gear on it, and I will go ahead and change that one out and put a new drum on it. Fine. Reverse drums typically can crack. Here's one that I was telling you about. Okay, it was cracked all the way through the rivet, and it's worked its way up or down, I don't know which, but it's went completely through the drum. So this is one that chews up transmission bands real quick. The drum here, this is that small hairline crack that's through the rivet area, but it's also migrating on up through into the web. So I elected to go ahead and change it out, just knowing that we got a crack. So we had a crack on this side, and then we've also got a crack on that side. So 2 strikes, you're out in this case. Another reason that you would think about changing out a drum is a lot of times on the early drums where they didn't use the replaceable lugs, the brake clutch discs are real sharp, and they'll come in here and eat away at the shoulder that the clutch discs ride on. You can take a 4-corner file a lot of times and smooth these areas up, but there isn't a whole lot of material between where they're worn and the bolt hole. So if you get too thin, I think that would break out. We have another example here that this drum has got quite a bit of wear again on it, but I don't know if you can hear it, but it's loose. So if this had a decent lug surface, I would come in here and just replace these rivets and re-rivet it down. years ago, we were of the opinion that we could just come in here and reset these rivets, and we'd take a punch and punch mark them and stuff, and we did that. I don't know that we really had any failures, but we've never taken them back apart. I did have the opportunity of going through a guy's transmission, a club member of ours. We did it over here, and it was loose, so we went ahead and tightened them down, and 500 miles later we had to go back in and change it out because peening them up back over just didn't set them. So I just recommend replacing the rivets. You can buy the rivets from Big Flat Rivets Company. There's two different sizes that basically you use to do that, and Big Flats has them. You can buy them from the vendors. I buy them in bulk because we do quite a few drums here, but it's very easy to change them out. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is come up with a transmission that we've got a good serviceable gear on and replace the drum. This is a brand new drum. These drums I get from, I'll just set them all out here. Set a set out here for you to see. These drums are available from Dave's Restoration. Dave has a website, phone number, what have you, and according to this, low speed and reverse drums are $200, early brake drums $325, and late brake drum 2627 is $350. And Dave offers a service where you can send him your good gear and buy a drum from him, and he will install your gear on the drum, and he charges $25, I believe. Yeah, $25 to do that. So you got a little freight shipping the drum, or shipping at least the gear to him. You can ship the gear only, or you can ship the drum and everything. He'll take it apart, put it all back together, and machine off the surfaces that's needed so that the rivets don't interfere with anything for a small fee of $25. And that's about all I have. There are other choices for drums, okay, but Dave has it's a billet cast iron piece that's completely machined. There's other ones that are made kind of like what Ford did, where they're a casting, okay, and you can buy complete drum and new gears, or you can buy drums only. So there's some options, and I would suggest that you do a little research and form your own opinion. But I've had real good success with Dave's drums. They're a nice drum. You'll notice how much thicker the drum is than a typical, where's a low speed? Oh, right there. Here's a low speed drum, Henry Ford logo on it, and it's just a thicker piece, a little heavier. It's made out of ductile cast iron billet. Another nice thing about it is these things, you can almost rivet them together and check them for balance, and they're just almost perfectly in balance. In balance, you don't have to do a whole lot of work to get them all balanced out. So that's another subject, but that's an option for you to look at for changing out drums. Of course, you always have the option of going out and finding you a good serviceable low-speed drum. Look at the gears when you're trying to find a drum. These gears will have quite a bit of wear. Some of them are worn more than others, and the wear pattern can be identified by looking at, and this one isn't worn out, but if you look directly onto the gear, you can see how the teeth are shaped, no irregularities in it. One side isn't wore off more than the other side. That gear comes up and then tapers in, and sometimes you'll see one side of that taper just missing, just gone. So that isn't a very good gear to use. You'll also see wear patterns where the gears are, and sometimes these wear patterns where the one gear is contacting the other, they're quite deep. If they are, you know, really deep and you've got a better gear, I would use it, especially if you're building a transmission out of just a bunch of parts. You know, you're going to mix up a bunch of different gears, and it's going to be a little there's a chance for it to be a little noisier than maybe the one that was in the car that has ran all together for 80, 100 years. So look for gears that are good. A lot of times you'll find some pits in them where they've sat and drawn a little moisture. Pit really doesn't hurt anything. You know, the old saying, it holds oil. I don't have a problem putting the pits. One side of the gears kind of wore off as opposed to the other, and then when you look down in with the gear surface itself, there's definitely a ridge there. So it's seen a lot of service. So I find the best possible gears that I can, and that's what I would go ahead and replace. So I think we're ready to, another thing, talking about loose, you know, drive plates, the same thing. Look at your drive plates. Nobody's reproducing the drive plate, but look at the drive plate, and this one here is loose. And other than that, it's a decent drive plate, so I'd just drill out these rivets and clean everything up, put it all back together, and install new rivets. I had some concerns and some issues that maybe taking these things apart wouldn't let things center back up, but believe it or not, they'll center up wonderful. So don't be scared of replacing the rivets rather than just retightening them if that's all you need to do. To go ahead and get the rivets knocked out of it, and we'll go through the installation process, which is getting the rivets removed. Then I use a press, and I press the gear and the drum together with the rivets installed, and I've made a couple of bucks to back up the rivets and install them, and then we'll finish up that drum to where we have a nice smooth surface. The rivets will stick a little proud on both surfaces, and in the case of a low speed, we've got two bearing surfaces, let's call it, that we need to clean up and dress up. So our goal is to end up with something like this today here, but we're going to do it with a battery reverse. I have a drum that has a fairly decent gear on it that we're going to use, and up here where it's highlighted, you can see where our crack has started through the web, working up. This one hadn't cracked all the way through, but it would just be a matter of time. But we've got a crack identified in it, so we're going to replace it. I'm using a mill. You could do this on a drill press. Good luck on doing it by hand, but I guess it could be done if you got good enough control. But a drill press or a mill makes this a little easier, and if I had what they call a clock, I could chuck that in and index it around and it'd go a lot quicker. But this is what I've got. So we're going to start, and it's an eyeball thing with me. I'm going to put in a starter bit because I don't want it to jump around on me. And I've got to find my rivet, and sometimes those are a little tough to find. I find if I just take a little Scotch guard or a little black paper, I can kind of get a better view of where that rivet is. It's a 1/4 inch rivet, and I want to drill a 3/16 inch hole through it, and I've just dropped my bit down on there and kind of marked it like you do with a center punch, and I'm just going to get myself to where I'm happy. That looks pretty good. I've got a little bit of clearance one way or another. I want to take out a little over 1/4 of an inch, so I'm just going to use a little stop on my depth. Oh, it's got a little hard in it for some reason. Alright. Smaller than the hole in the drill. Tap it out. Anyhow, so we drilled down through the rivet head and simply took our punch and it dropped down into the rivet and just drive it out of the way. There's another head right there. So we'll do this for the other 2 that I've got. And we got one more to do and then we're ready to go to the next step. So we've got them drilled out. A lot of times there'll be a little bit of the rivet left in it. I just find that you can pry them usually just out. Like that. And that rascal is loose now. Alright, so this really isn't sliding off the drum very easy because I've got some little ridges here. I think you can probably hear it. And I'm just going to dress that off on my belt sander, just that very edge there. So got rid of them little burrs, so let's see if I can knock it out now. Got the gear out. So we'll probably do a little more cleaning and dressing on that surface when we put our new drum on. It should be a tight, snug fit, but really shouldn't have to be driving it on. But I'm looking and just, you know, again, I'm just looking and verifying, yeah, I really like the gear on that one. So this is our candidate. So we'll go over here and talk about how we buck up the rivets. So I'm going to install my gear, and it's kind of a tight fit, so I'm going to try to bump it on a little bit. I've cleaned off the edges, and it's still just a little snug. I want to make sure that this surface is all good and clean, and no burrs or anything on it that'll cause an interference with getting it on straight. I'll talk about this here in a moment, but we'll see if I can line this up and just kind of gently persuade that. So I've got me a chunk of aluminum block, and I'm just hopefully I got my holes lined up. Yep, I do. And I'll have to do a little adjusting here to get the holes lined up, but we'll get that, get a center punch out here and a punch and try to switch that around a little bit. Might have to clamp the gear down a little bit and rotate it, but I'd like it to where all these rivets, there's 8 of them, and they'll just drop down through all the holes. And then I made a buck. Like I said, you can send these drums off for $25 and he'll do it, but I do a lot of them, so I just made a buck, and this buck will sit on there and back up the head of the rivet, okay, basically like that, and then I'll peen over this end using the press to hold everything together nice and tight, and I use a small ball peen hammer to peen that over. A lot of light taps rather than just hitting it heavy. It's a soft rivet. You don't need to heat it. It goes together nice with just cold. I will take these rivets, they're rusty. I'm going to go over to my wire wheel and I'll just clean off the rust, get it out of the way. So I've got a nice shiny rivet to work with. So let me get this straightened out to where the rivets will go in. Get 8 rivets cleaned up here. So just cleaning the rust off the rivets. Okay, so these rivets, I want to get them all installed. And I point out, there's obviously a big chamfer here on this side for that 60-degree rivet head. On the back side of the drum, there is a chamfer. If you can see it, there's a little bit of a chamfer where when you peen this rivet over, it'll go ahead and expand out and get into that chamfer. But our rivets are sticking through quite proud. We're going to peen them over. And then, like I said, we'll machine these areas back off. So let me finish putting these rivets in. We'll move over to the press. Okay, so before we go to the press, talk a little bit about my bucks. Again, I do this, and rather than send them back to Dave, I do quite a few of them. And so I've just decided to do this myself, and I came up with a chunk of steel and made a buck. And I've got one for the reverse drum where the gear will sit down in it, and all those rivets are against that surface, and I'll put a piece across here and press in our press to push that gear in solid to the brake drum, and then start peening them over. So that's how I hold that drum flush and square, or square as it'll get with the gear surface, and peen everything over. This buck here obviously is for the low speed drum, and this one also works on the brake drum. So at any rate, we're ready to go over to the press and press this all together. Over here at the press, there's my buck that I made. We've already got our rivets installed, and they're all proud on here, and I found that they're all proud about the same height. So I'm going to set that in there. I've got me a chunk of aluminum here that I'm going to bridge across, and I'm going to put just enough pressure on this rascal to where I feel as though the gear and the drum are about as tight as what I could get them. Okay? Get that out of the way for a moment. And when installing the rivets, like I said, they can be installed cold. The way I was told to do this, or taught by several different people that I respect, they always have the opinion, rather than use a big hammer and really smack it, just take a little hammer and a lot of light taps. So I'm going to start with one rivet and go to 180 degrees out to the other side, tap it down, move back over, pick up this one, and then I'll relocate the thing to pick up the last 4. So this gets a little noisy, but it's just a lot of little light taps. Okay, so we started with a rivet that was pretty proud, and I've now got that flattened down, and there is a chamfer in there, so that rivet is mushroomed out and filled that chamfer. And this is the part on a reverse drum on both. When we get over here to the lathe, I'm going to machine off this excess material. So got 8 more to do here, so let's get started. So I've got 4 of the rivets set in place. And you can see how the rivets are really proud, and I've peened those things down to where I've filled up that, compressed the rivet into the hole, and it's peened over that countersink that's there. So I want to relocate it so I can do the other 4 rather. Okay, so we've examining our rivets and we've peened them over, and they started off about 3/16 of an inch proud, and we've peened them over and got them to where there's a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch. And remember, there is a chamfer on the gear part, so that head, so this part of the rivet has expanded into that chamfer. The rivets need to be cleaned up because they ride, this drum sets onto the low speed drum. So this surface needs to be cleaned because it's going to run on this surface. Also on the low speed, like I said, I only need to clean off this side, but on the low speed I'm going to clean off, and this is a new drum replaced. So you can see I've cleaned off what is proud on that rivet on that side, the big head side. And then I'll also have to come in here and clean off this side, which is all of our dimpling over that we've done. So low speed, you have to clean off both sides. Reverse, just the one side only. Brake drum would also require cleaning off the inside surface, because you've got your 3, this is an earlier drum that had the bronze bushing for the spacer, but you use 3 washers that go in here to set up your set up the gap. So this side would also have to be cleaned off on it, as well as this side. So I'm within a thou or so here. Set it up here, and I'm going to clean off these rivet heads, these rivets that I've peened over on it. And I'm really not wanting to remove a whole lot of material here, so I'm just going to make some thin passes and get that cleaned up. So we'll get a cutter set up here. And you can see all I'm doing is I'm just taking off what's proud on that, and I'll continue doing that until I get down here to the still a little proud, so I'll make another pass at it and we'll call it good. Wipe it off. All of our roots are with the surface. So that's the end of doing what we need to do on a reverse drum. And just for giggles and wiggles, let me set up my static balancer. And let's just see. This is a drum that's just been installed on a gear, and let's just see how close it is to being in balance. Most all the time, these things are so dadgum close, you can almost run them without ever balancing them. So here's a brand new drum on an old gear, and it's just almost, well, it's closer to what a lot of the Henry Ford ones are. You know, it is a little bit out of balance. I mean, ever so slight. You know, now it ain't rolling down like what it was. There we go. So it's a little out of balance. That would be so easy to fix. Just there's a lot of material here. Just take a little die grinder and just grind off a little bit of the heavy spot and put it back together. And that's one of the reasons I do like his drums as opposed to some of the others that I have had the opportunity to work with. These drums here, you can balance. They're in balance, so just almost out of the box. Where we've seen some of the other ones that you spend a good deal of money on, and then you got to drill holes and add weight and do a lot of work to it. So this is a good option for you guys. So we remove the gear, drill it out, tapping out the rivets, clean the rivet heads off, reinstalled the gear into the drum, peened it over on the press. Like I said, I've got I made some bucks. These are Dave's Restoration drums. He does that service for $25. So rather than, you know, if you were only doing one drum or two drums, probably the thing to do would be ship it to him, okay? But like I said, I do them here because I do so many of them, rather than waiting on stuff back and forth on freight. But the same process would be the same for doing the low speed drum, but you would clean off both sides. The brake drum only needs to have the one side cleaned off, or the brake drum needs to have both sides cleaned off, excuse me, because the way things all work together here, things do rub. So you know, this is a good option for you to look at, and don't be scared of replacing the rivets in the drum. It's fairly straightforward, pretty easy to do. Takes a press, ball peen hammer, a drill press, or a lathe or a mill, and you do have to have access to a lathe. I suppose a guy could carefully come in there with a high-speed die grinder and kind of grind them heads off if it dished out a little bit. I don't think that to be a problem, but a lathe would be the better tool to use. So that's our story on transmission drums, replacing them. Any questions or concerns, you know how to get a hold of us. Our names and email addresses and stuff are on the website. We'll get some more information up on Dave's stuff, so you'll have the information that you can contact him direct and speak with him.
Tootsie, goodbye. Tootsie, don't cry. The choo-choo train that takes me away from you, no words can tell how sad it makes me. Kiss me, Tootsie, and then do it over again. Watch for the mail, I'll never fail. If you don't get a letter, then you'll know I'm in jail. Tootsie, don't cry. Tootsie, goodbye. Tootsie, goodbye. Tootsie.